Hi, I'm George Howard, and we're here today talking with Chris Blackwell about careers in the music industry. And to get things started, I'd like Chris just to kind of introduce himself a bit, if he doesn't mind.
Hi, I'm Chris Blackwell.
And you started Island Records, when was it?
I started Island Records in Jamaica in 1959. I was actually teaching water skiing at a hotel. I had the water ski concession at Half Moon Hotel, and there was a band that was playing there, which was a kind of a jazz band, really, cocktail jazz kind of thing. And I really liked them, and I just kind of wanted to record them. So I hadn't had any experience in that or anything, but you know, I booked a studio, and we all got in a van and drove into Kingston, which was quite far because the hotel was in Montego Bay, about 100 and something miles away, and went into Kingston, recorded the record in one day in mono, and then I took the tapes and I went up to New York, got it mastered, got a cover made, came back, you know, took the stampers to the pressing plant, got them pressed, took them around, sold them. Didn't sell very many.
You were selling them out of your kind of car at that point, going to record stores.
Yeah, I was selling it out of the car.
Yeah.
We didn't sell too many. I sold most of them. Understandably, I sold most of them actually in the in the hotel where he played.
Okay.
I didn't really hardly sell any of them anywhere else, but there was something about just the whole process of doing it which really sort of, I got bitten by it, and so from then on I was in the record business.
I think it's so instructive that you know, this is designed to be helpful for students who are entertaining the idea of getting into the music business. And just at that little brief description of how you kind of got started encapsulates an awful lot that I think is important in terms of you learned the whole industry within your geography right there, from signing the talent to pressing it. How important, how important is that, first of all, even in today's industry, to have a facility with all aspects of the record business?
Well, obviously, I guess, you know, one tends to you know, support the system that you know, or the way that you've started. So for me, I believe completely in that very same process I described, you know, because from that, on a very simple level, you learned everything. You learned the recording process, you learned the mastering process, you learned the manufacturing process, the distribution and the sales process, all in a tiny little scale, but still it's important to know all those different things, because you need to know how they all work and how they all interact and what is necessary, because just making, let's say you make a record but you have no idea what to do with it, you are putting yourself at the mercy of lots of companies or lots of situations which, like in any industry, in anything, are going to take advantage of your lack of knowledge. Plus, I also think that if you're doing something, there is a passion that only you can have for it, that you can't sort of delegate that passion. And so you really have to sort of push it yourself, you know what I mean, get it going yourself.
I do. I think that's something that a lot of students, a lot of artists who are saying, well, when do I get a manager? When do I get a lawyer? Those types of things. And my response is always, well, do as much as you possibly can on your own before you hire anyone out. What you described, is it possible for an artist to do what you just described, or do they need someone like you, the visionary, the label, to go and do all those details, or is it possible for an artist to be their own label at the beginning?
Here we are in 2004. I would say it's very possible for an artist to do it himself, because I knew nothing about what I was doing. I just loved the band, but I don't play anything or sing or anything. So somebody who actually is a musician and can go and tour and play, they now have the ability to reach their audience. They now have the ability to let their audience know all the time when they're coming to tour places. They have the ability to distribute information their music to their audience. They are no longer confined and dependent on meeting somebody who's going to introduce them to somebody else, who's going to introduce them to somebody else, so they eventually, maybe they get a chance to get a record out. I believe that if you love what you're doing, the best thing you can do is just do it, because it's not even work, because you're loving what you're doing, and bit by bit, if you're good at it, you will succeed, and there is no rush. The big problem, I think, nowadays with everything is that there's such a rush to get somewhere so fast, and really, ideally, you want to try and get there when you're about 90.
Right.
But if you're enjoying the road,
enjoying the travel.
If you're not enjoying the road, then that's another story.
Yeah.
But if you're enjoying it and you enjoy playing live, then why would you want to peak at 20 or 30 or 40?
That's a wonderful point. And you described it, I think it was around 1959 when the scenario you were just describing about finding this artist.
1959, yeah.
How similar or dissimilar is it now in 2004? I mean, is that process, there's different means of technology, but the process is one of connecting with a constituency. And you described starting from a local, regional area. You're selling the records out of the hotels. I think there's a lesson in there for students about understanding their region before trying to get too large or go national. Is that something you agree with or disagree with?
No, I agree with that completely. You say, how different is it now? It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. The core of it is exactly the same. The core of it is how talented is the person in the first place, how intelligent, because intelligence is very important in order to have the ability to sustain, because once you do start to get success, so many things are thrown at you from so many different people from different areas. You have to be able to make judgments all the time to make sure you don't go and put a foot wrong and do the wrong thing. So it's very important to have the talent in the first place, but secondly to have the intelligence to be able to weave your way through the labyrinth that exists.
Well, that leads me to an interesting point. As someone who has had an uncanny knack for spotting great artists, from just too numerous of a list to mention, what is it that you look for? What is that essential quality that you can recognize in an artist, even in their most kind of undeveloped form, and see down the road a little bit? You mentioned intelligence. Are there other characteristics?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what it is. I'm like an amateur. Do you know what I mean? So, and as such, I guess sitting here now, many years after I started, one can look back and say, yes, you've signed or found or worked with some incredible people. But I wish I could tell you that there was any science to it.
No.
I feel that it's a matter of instinct, of feeling whether the people, how passionate the people are, how smart they are. I mean, there have been lots of people. When I say lots, there have been a few. Probably one of the most famous people groups I worked with is U2. When I saw them first, I didn't care for their music at all. I didn't hear their music. I'm from Jamaica. I like bass and drum, and they were really rinky-dink sounding when I heard them. But I definitely wanted to sign them because I just felt for them. I felt that they were really true about themselves and true about what they were doing. And I felt they were smart, and I felt they would succeed. The fact I didn't like them at the time was not the point. I felt, I sort of delegated my trust to them, and that's really what I did. I did little or nothing for U2 except giving them their freedom, to.
And how important is that? I mean, this was a band that had been turned down by something. All the major labels had passed on U2. You're sitting there saying this was a band that didn't knock you out of your chair. You didn't say, I must have them. You saw something called instinct or whatever, and then you allowed them to do their thing. How important is that with working with artists? What type of advice do you have for people, be they potential managers, record executives? How do you allow them to become who they are?
Well, one of the key things is to sign people who are good in the first place. So then So then you are just helping them, you know. You're literally helping. You're not telling them what to do. You're suggesting what to do. Anybody you're telling what to do all the time is going to be too dependent on you, and you're not there all the time. And they have to go on stage. They have to make their own career. They have to make decisions all the time. You can't be with them any minute of the day. So there have been maybe a couple of people that I've worked with. Probably my first hit, this girl, Millie Small, who was not particularly smart. You know what I mean? She was a great character, or is a great character, and she had an extraordinary voice. So that was something that, you know, somebody I worked with, and I had a sound in my head that I wanted it to be, and fortunately, you know, it came out like I wanted it to be, and it really sounded like a hit to me, and it became a huge hit. But she only really had one hit, right, because she didn't have what was there to sustain, to last. You know, I mean, I tried to see, because her voice was a voice really which was funny. Yeah. You know, it was just, you couldn't miss it. You couldn't really hear an album of it. You know, it was very much more of a single, and and I've always believed that live, you know, you've got to enjoy playing live, and you've got to be good at live. That is the key. It was the key when I started, and now more than ever it's the key. You've got to be strong live.
Why more than ever now?
Because now, at this point that we're talking about now, there is not as yet any system which is to protect the work that anybody does when they make a record.
You're talking about copyright infringement, downloads, those types of things.
Downloads, yeah. But, you know, unlike other people in the record, I didn't consider it stealing. I didn't consider that to be the case at all. It's just technology has moved ahead of I don't know. It's just moved ahead, and you haven't as yet devised a way to compensate the people for their work. But if you're strong live, that's absolutely the main thing. That's the main thing, because you will build an audience, and you will grow that audience. And if you release a song, and whereas before you might have sold 500,000, and now you only sold 200,000, the other 300,000, actually probably more than 300,000, probably another 700,000. I'm just making figures out of it, you know. Sure. People will have downloaded and got it, right, like it, and come to your show. Your show, you are then worth more on your show. Mm-hmm. It's like it used to be a long time ago. It was only in the 60s that people started making serious money out of records. Right. Before that, people would make a record, hope to have a hit so that they get $1,000 a night more. Right. You know.
You mentioned Millie in the single "My Boy Lollipop." One of the things that you did with that was take it from, correct me if I'm wrong, but take it from Jamaica and then make a deal with Philips to sort of help you bring it broader for young people starting their careers. Maybe they've signed some artists. How important is it to partner with people, and what are the virtues and the dangers of, you know, potentially going to a distributor, going to a larger label? What do you gain and what do you give up?
Well, my situation was a little, I'll just explain it a little bit, because you see, I started in Jamaica, and then when independence came in Jamaica, yeah, I'd been going a couple of years, and I had produced quite a few records that had done well in Jamaica. They'd done very well in Jamaica, and part of the reason they did well was because they were the first records by Jamaicans for Jamaicans. Yeah. So people really were responding well to their own right, making records. Right. So by 1962, I was selling more records in England to the Jamaican community in England than I was selling in Jamaica, because my records were starting to, quote, sound better, sound cleaner, sound prettier and everything. But they were selling less to the Jamaican audience. I see. While the other guys, the sound system guys, Coxsone, Duke Reed, Leslie Kong, all these other guys were making records which didn't sound so prissy as mine had started to sound, and just were raw and rough and sounded, you know, and those were what was really catching. So then, with independence, That means when Jamaica got its independence from the British.
Right.
Two things, really. One is that I was selling more in England, and two, the general wave of feeling at that time is, okay, now Jamaican for Jamaicans. And the way I'm packaged, I'm more identified with English than Jamaican. So I thought, well, I'll go to England. And I was friends with pretty much all my competitors. So I made deals with them for me to release their records in England. So when I went to England, I produced very little and just released records from all these different guys. And Island Records was a very hot company in just the Jamaican field. I never sent any records to newspapers to be reviewed because they wouldn't review. I never sent them to the radio, they wouldn't play them. So if I manufactured 6,221, I sold 6,221, and none given away. So but that was a very tight market. So when I did this record with Millie and it was finished, it just sounded like it could be a huge hit.
Cross outside of the niche that you had established.
Right. So, but I did have a company, you see. So I always had the option, when I was talking to anybody else, I had the option that I could put it out on my own label. My own label was there, it was working.
You weren't reliant upon anyone else.
Right. So I made a deal with, it was Philips at the time, which became Polygram, etc. And I made a deal with them for just that record with, I think, a couple options. I can't remember what now. But what also traditionally would happen is for independence is if the business that we did, you could last forever on that. You have your market, you know what you're selling. You might make a little mistake, you're not going to make a huge mistake. But if you had a hit, you would never get paid. You see, if people are used to doing business with you and paying you $1,000 a month, $1,200 one month, $700 one month, but it just varies like that, and suddenly they have to pay you $10,000, they're not going to pay you that $10,000, right? Because they're waiting to see what else you're going to have later on. Right. In the meantime, you have to pay your pressing
manufacturing
plant
costs
and your manufacturing plant. So certainly in those early years, the 50s, it happened with a lot of American record companies. When I saw that happen, and so that's sort of why I licensed it, because I didn't want it to happen to me. Because you'd have a big hit, and then go out of business.
Well, and I think that happens frequently today too with independent labels. They have this kind of aberration, this thing that takes them out of their market, and they never recover from that. Right. The hit is worse than the failure. Right. So you were smart enough to realize that and kind of give yourself the support of having Philips to do your collection. And they're going to pay Philips, right? Is that the bottom line?
But the difference where you're saying is talking about a student. In my case, I had a label.
Yes.
You see what I mean? So I could speak a little bit from strength because I wasn't going and begging them. I was going and saying, well, look, I'm bringing you a hit because it's too... And the people, to give them their due, recognized that, it sounded like a hit record.
So, one of the many lessons in that statement is that you had built something on your own that then allowed you to have that freedom rather than just trying to come out of the gates, have some artist, have no company, and just try and make a deal. Right. I say to all my students, the more you bring to a label, the less they can take away. Right. And that can be from an artist perspective, or if you're trying to do some sort of joint deal with the label. What are the downsides of doing those deals? You faced a larger downside, I suppose, with Polygram when you sold Island to them.
Well, when I sold Island, it's like you're selling a house. You're moving out of your home, and you can't really then tell the people how to decorate it anymore. But when you do joint ventures, when you do deals with labels, it's very risky because you get into so much politics that exists in all corporations. So it depends who's really made the deal. And then, you may make a deal with somebody, and by the time your record comes out, the person's gone. That's the first. Right. That is death.
And that can happen to bands, too. You get signed by an A&R person, and that person is gone before your record comes out.
Well, that's a big problem. Because it's not in anybody's interest there to make you successful. Right. Unfortunately, the politics of it, that's how it works. The other danger is that you are a stepchild. You're not, when I talk about you as that is like as an artist or as a producer of an artist or as a label who represents the artist. You're a kind of stepchild of the label. So you're not really that label's artist. You know, there's a couple of stages before. So only when that becomes very successful are you then sort of included.
Yes.
Because then you're proved to be a moneymaker, and then once you're a moneymaker, you become very popular overnight. Wow. But until that point in time, you're a kind of a stepchild, and you're not going to get any particular push because it's not on that label.
Right.
I mean, a label which I always avoid doing any business with was a label actually that I most respected, which was Columbia Records.
Columbia.
I love Columbia Records.
That Bob was Dylan, Miles Davis.
Yeah, they had literally the top of the line
Sure.
in every field. So I felt there was no space for me there anyhow. There's nothing I can really bring to the table there.
You would always be a stepchild in that situation.
Yeah, and in fact there was never a label that was launched through Columbia that ever did any good.
That's interesting.
Because everybody right down to this local salespeople, Columbia Records, it was like a religion. Yeah.
Well, I think that you bring up some interesting points, and your metaphor of the house, I think, is interesting, decorating a house. It's always struck me that you have a very acute kind of aesthetic sensibility. So everything that you do, from the innovative nature of the island packaging with the spines that, you know, all kind of matched up, through to, you know, the idea that the cover art is essential back at a time when cover art wasn't essential, to the fact that you have other businesses involving hotels and just space. How much is that aesthetic sensibility important for people that want to be in the record business? I mean, you hear about these people that know every record that's ever been made, but they don't have any kind of taste. You know, and that issue of taste, while it's a very hard one to quantify, it strikes me as someone who wants to be successful in this business needs to have an aesthetic, needs to have a point of view. You have a very defined point of view. How does that manifest itself in the way you do business?
Well, I don't know if it's the best thing to say to people who will be hearing this, which is students, but I don't believe so much in this thing of focusing so much on a narrow focus. You know, I believe that you should live your life and be as open as possible all the time to new influences, new ideas, and you can get them from different places, you know. So you can see something or you hear something there, and you can think how you can adapt that to something else. So I'm just not a very, you know, when I say focus, there's another word I'm looking for.
Well, generalist, you know, with specialities rather than being a specialist, you know.
Right.
And in this time in the business, you need to, as we began our conversation with the idea that you had a hand in all facets of the process, but more than that, you also brought to it this kind of, you know, you were a water ski operator. Right. You were selling real estate. Right. You were the scout for the Dr. No on the James Bond. You know, so this whole kind of body of knowledge that then you fine-tuned into the aesthetic that became Island Records.
Right. Well, there's also a point there too. You see, because I don't believe in this whole thing. This is a creative and this isn't creative. Everybody is creative. Everybody. The receptionist, how they answer the phone, is creative at times. You know, or can be if they're encouraged to be, or if they need to be. But I don't agree with all this nonsense that, oh, that's creative and they're not creative. You know, every job, what creative means is you're trying to think. In my opinion, you're trying to think outside the box when you come to something and you have difficulty. You're trying to figure how do you get around that, and that you need to do in whatever job you're doing. So, you know, over years, I'm to some degree viewed as being a quote creative executive, but I don't. You know, I think it's, I don't say it's a misnomer, I'm proud of having that, but I don't think it should be just, you know, limited to people who do my kind of job, or producers or writers, or, you know, everybody.
So as someone who might want to get into the business side of the music world right now, and it doesn't necessarily mean working in a label, creativity and openness is one quality. If you're looking to hire someone, what else do you look for, or what advice would you have for someone who wants to get into the business?
Well, I think you have to keep your word. But that goes for everything. But if you're dealing with artists, this whole thing is like artist-friendly, not artist-friendly. I find that a tremendous amount of people in the record business don't like artists.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine why you'd go into the record business if you don't like artists. And so there is this thing that artists, like somebody, quite prominent, they'd say, I can't stand artists. You like artists? And I'd say, yeah, I love artists. I love being around creative people. I love, so I don't like them at all, And to me, that's just unbelievable. So, but a lot of those same people have been very successful in the music business. But it's very foreign to me. I mean, you're talking to me, my feeling is you should be in the music business if you love music. And it's essentially the same kind of thing before you're in the music business. You have a record, you love the record, you ring somebody around and say, you got to come and hear this record. That's just an expansion of that, of turning somebody on to something that you think is great. So
having this enthusiasm, being almost, evangelical. Almost, you call it a salesman, you can call it whatever you want, but you're being a salesman with passion. You believe in it. And keeping your word is something you said in an industry that is notorious for not keeping their words. Certainly historically, the record industry has been one in which artists have said that, I've been ripped off. Right. So to hear someone of your stature saying keeping your word is essential. How does that manifest itself on a day-to-day?
Just means that you can build some trust then. If you say to somebody something, you stick to it. Right. And even if it's something that you wish you didn't say, you still have to stick to it, really. Sure. You just have to be careful what you say.
A successful entrepreneur is sometimes defined as somebody that finds a solution to a problem. The music industry seems like a good place for an entrepreneur these days, as there's so many problems. What are the problems you see in the music industry? Why? We've made some comparisons between 1959 and 2004 and some similarities, but obviously there's some differences. What's happened now that has made it so different? What are the problems, and what can we do to fix them?
Well, the problems. Well, from my point of view, for a start, I don't believe that the music business is an appropriate business for Wall Street. That's the first thing. And I'll go back from there, because the way Wall Street operates is you have to make your figures every quarter.
Right?
And those figures have got to increase every quarter. How can you possibly do that in a creative business? How can you possibly do that? You can only go close to doing it is if you force people to release a record before it's ready, so that you can ship it, because you may make your figures, but it's going to end in tears later on when the record returns. The other thing is also, what it does is it forces you to have quick success, because the way the accounting in the record business works is if you invest money in a new artist, you're not allowed to capitalize that expenditure. In other words, you're not allowed to say this is an investment in a product which will earn us money for many years, and therefore it's a capital investment.
Capital expense.
You have to expense it. So if you have to expense it, then you have to earn money on the other side right away. Yeah. Not 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, when most people's contracts are up anyhow. You have to get it back quickly. So what does that mean? That means it forces you to focus on a single, and then forces you to sell that single like a new product coming into the marketplace, like a toothpaste or something like that, which is totally against the whole thing of how you build any long-time artist, because people, to have a credibility about, for people to believe in an artist, they can't believe they're being sold it like a commodity. They have to feel, they have to hear about it, they have to, you've got to market it in a way that they don't realize it's even being marketed to them.
Right.
It's just coming through to them. And that it's impossible, almost impossible for that to happen instantly.
Takes time.
I would say that of recent years, the best marketing job I've seen on an artist is the most spectacular as an example. I would have to say is like Norah Jones,
Oh, yeah.
because I don't know much her record sold. I think it sold multi platinum, but somehow I don't remember seeing any great ads for it, having it shoved down your throat. I just seemed to appear.
Yeah.
So it was a very good. It was a good record. It was a good record.
A good record that was given the time that it needed to catch people's attention, worked via word of mouth, wasn't some big push down on MTV, radio, etc.
So the whole record business is geared to single.
Yeah.
Geared to single. So that's what's got it into trouble, because that same gearing to single it means that less attention is spent on the rest of the record. You don't even hear people in the big record companies talking about an album so much. Mm-hmm. They talk about which are the tunes. Mm-hmm. So that very same thing now, finally, the public is sick to death of being sold something for $20, which is really worth $2. Right. So they've acted, and they download the tunes they like, and you can keep the rest.
Yeah. So a young entrepreneur in the music business needs to find some way to give his or her projects time to develop.
Yes.
We keep coming back to the idea of the road, being on the road.
That's it. You've got to find and work with an act, an artist, a group, whatever, who are really strong on the road. And because I used to go on the road. Traffic was my, like say, my band, because I was very close with him, because I worked with Steve Winwood from Spencer Davis Group. Then they formed Traffic. Yeah, right. And part of the deal is that he didn't really like touring, actually. He would only go on the road if I went on the road too, which was fine. I loved going on the road. Ahmet Ertegun, who's my great hero in the record business, said to me, "What are you doing on the road all the time? You've got a record company to run." And I said, "Well, when you go on the road, you feel the audience. Yeah. You'll get differently. You're in Detroit, you're one day Denver, another day, all over the place. You learn so much. You learn, one of the things you also learn is what it's like to be on the road. Right. So you're not like a record executive sending somebody off on a 3-month tour, and you have no idea what that means. So the reason to go on the road is to watch every show, and after the show go over with the band whether that tune might be better there, or what was wrong this, and just little by little just tune it up until they've got a fantastic show with a beginning, middle, and end. Right. And when it ends, they want to see more.
But what you're talking about is connection. You as an executive, connecting with the band that you're working with, being out there with them, knowing what it is that makes them special, helping them fine-tune that, and ultimately helping them connect with their constituency, the audience. And that's the thing that always baffles me. People talk about how the record industry is failing or whatever. What's failing is that we're not connecting well with our constituents. People don't know what's coming at them.
No, I mean, the positive side of all the digital revolution is that there isn't less interest in music. That's for sure. There is not less interest in music with people. It's made it possible for a lot more people to make music. Not necessarily good music, but it's now no longer necessary to actually be able to play an instrument to make music, which of course is good in some ways, but bad in most ways. But it's down to somebody, it's down to people connecting. It's down to really finding people who can connect to an audience and just build that up. And then, I've always said records are just the milestones in the career. They're not the be-all and end-all of everything. They're literally the milestones.
Right. Your new company, Palm Pictures, the name itself kind of tells where the focus of the company is, images. How important is that for people getting into the music business? the visual side of it now with DVD, with internet broadband technology. Do entrepreneurs and/or artists need to be thinking visually more now than ever? Is this a way to help the industry grow? Do you have any thoughts on, or why Palm Pictures?
Well, Palm Pictures because, from the time that video became important in the early 80s, I think you have to think of the visual side of things, because if you are on television, or if you have an opportunity to be on television, you need to be sure that what you're doing is you've got to be really sure what you're doing is right, well thought out and well done, because before, the packaging used to be an album cover. When it was 12 by 12, there was a decent size to work with. When it became a CD, of course, it became sort of like a pack of cigarettes, so it didn't have the same impact. But so the video really became the role of the album cover and the kind of showcase, really, So that was it. You could make a great record, you make a lousy video, you really have a problem. Yeah. So I just felt, and this I guess goes back to my most basic roots in the record business, which is going to a pressing plant and finding out how much they want to press a record for. It costs the same to manufacture a DVD as it costs to manufacture a CD.
Right.
Virtually the same. Right. A couple of cents difference. If for the couple of cents difference you can get something which is visual, how can it not eventually go in that direction? You don't have to watch the visual,
right?
But you have that ability, for the same cost of, virtually the same cost of manufacture. So that was actually the reason where I wanted to go into that particular area, and I felt it would be a large growth area.
Right.
But I don't think that you're going to break an act on a DVD. Mm-hmm. I don't think that, unless it's the kind of act who's more like a kind of cabaret type
mm-hmm.
act, somebody like that who really stays in one place and can't really tour,
right.
and has got a very visual and a very stagey type of thing. Somebody like that can.
Okay.
But other than that, I don't think it's any different from what it used to be. You've got to be just strong on the road and connect.
Final bits of advice for these aspiring students who want to succeed, who look to you as someone that is the pinnacle of success. What is there? What can you tell them?
Well,
You've told
if
them
you love
already.
it, you just keep doing it. You just keep doing it if you love it. And what you earn is a byproduct. I don't think you should go into it to get rich. I think you should go into it because you really love it.
Thank you very much.